What are namespaces? Let's first know that we have 4 default namespaces available when the cluster is deployed. So the default is default. Everything is by default created in this namespace. And then we have kube public and kube system. Just ignore that. These are the system namespaces. So what's a namespace and why we use them? Let's say I am working in the same namespace on the same project, and someone else is also working in the same namespace, maybe on the same namespace or maybe on the same project. Maybe he can define my app deployment. Maybe I can deploy my app deployment. So if the deployment name is same, we can override each other's deployment. This is the biggest problem. Let's say I am building an Apache PHP deployment, and if someone else is using the Apache PHP deployment, or using that container, or I am using the secret file as just secret, and the other team is also defining secret. They are defining their own secret file. I am defining my own secret file. But whenever anyone, I or the other team will apply that configuration, my configuration will be overwritten. So the ideal situation is my team should have my own namespace and the other team should have their own namespace. This is the one advantage of it. And we can have 2 teams working on the application, and we can have a third team who is working on the database. Now the database, both the application needs the same database, but now we have to create the database service and the database deployment in both the namespaces. The better way is we create a third namespace database, and the database guy, they are doing whatever they are doing in their database namespace, and we from our namespace both the teams can connect to the database namespace. And by doing that, we are actually reducing the hassle of DB team, that they have to deploy a database again and again in everybody's namespace. We can have our log server, syslog server running in a separate namespace, and we can all send to our logs to that syslog solution in one namespace. So if the app is big, if we have so many containers, so many complicated components, so we can group them together in our namespaces. And yeah, we can have dev environment and we can have production environment. So we have to take, if there are no namespaces, we should have a cluster for dev, and we should have cluster of staging, and maybe you can have a cluster of production. So what we can do is we don't want to go for 3 clusters. We can have 3 namespaces naming dev, staging and production, and we can run the application in separate environments on the same cluster, and everything will be isolated. Further, we have, I'm just thinking of scenarios. We have 2 versions of the same application running. Maybe one will
Ishan,
yeah.
Hear me?
Yeah. So one scenario can be we have different version of same application. What one is live now, and another application is almost going into the production. But both the applications need to be live. So people are actually using both the applications, and both the applications are connecting to the database. So database can be the same, and you can have 2 applications, and they can run simultaneously on the same cluster in the different namespaces. Another important thing is we can assign resources to a namespace. We can limit if we have a small cluster and a lot of teams are working on it. Eventually, what the pod is using the RAM, pod is using CPU and hard disk. So eventually, if everyone is spinning their pods, maybe the resources will choke up, and nobody will be able to deploy their deployments. So what we can do is we can use the limits to limit a namespace, that okay, you can have 2 GB of RAM, you can have maximum 2 gigahertz available, or 2 CPUs you can request. That's like that. So we can have so many scenarios with the namespace, so we should have idea of what namespace is. Okay, the namespace, under namespace, resources that cannot be shared. I was saying that the database, you can have a namespace for database, but in my namespace, I should have my own config map. The config map cannot be shared with outside the namespace. So every team should have their own config map because they know what they are doing. every namespace will have its own secret so that the secrets don't collide. And the service which can be shared, the resources which can be shared are the service. But why because someone is running something inside their namespace and that is accessible through service. So logically, if database service is running on some other container, so from my namespace, in another namespace, so from my namespace, my app should be able to connect to database service on another namespace. So these resources we can share. And we just, in our config map, we said that the database URL will be MySQL -service. Now we just have to add a dot namespace to which we are gonna connect. Like everything right now is running in our default namespace. If I have my namespace, I will define database URL is equal to my SQL service colon my namespace or my DB namespace. So we just have to put this parameter and we can go and connect to that namespace service if that service is running with this URL. So that's how we can share the namespaces. There are so many options. So I have just told you the command that if you do kubectl API resources -- namespace is equal to false or is equal to true. So whatever you can share and whatever you cannot share, so you will have a list of it, and you will know it. So there are many components you can share it, you cannot share. So by using this command, you will get it all. Okay, before going into volumes, I think we should do something with the namespace. So let's first cover this topic, and then we can go on. kubectl get namespaces. So I have my default namespace. I have Ingress Nginx. I have kube node lease, public, and the system available. So what I want to do is I should have create namespace, my namespace. Create namespace, what it is in kubectl. Create my namespace. And if I hit get namespaces, my namespace is there. And if I say kubectl get all -n and my namespace, I have nothing running here. If I do kubectl get all, in the default namespace, we have so many things available. So if I want to have, let's say if I have everything, we have the config map, the secret, and phpMyAdmin deployment and phpMyAdmin. Okay, fine. So first I will do kubectl apply -f. It is the same file, config map -n and our namespace. So I am telling, just first open this file if I have not defined it in the, okay, let's just first do the config map. Why are you always type this wrong? AWP. So our config map is done. Our secret is done. What else we need? We need phpMyAdmin deployment. So we will go with the same deployment. These are the same files, but I am running in my namespace. And now we know we need to connect to our phpMyAdmin service. Okay, I can edit it if something is wrong. So I can do phpMyAdmin service. So if I do kubectl get all -n my name space. So we have our service running. And yes, that's what I was thinking. I have copied the external service. Okay, doesn't matter if it is an external service. What we can do is we can do minikube service, phpMyAdmin service, and the namespace. Doesn't matter. So phpMyAdmin is there. Just let me open phpMyAdmin service. Oh no, sorry, the config map. We have defined the URL there. So this is our config map. It is the same config map. I have just used the word .default in front of it. Why I am using default? Because I know that MySQL service is running in the default namespace. I mean, you can have a database namespace separately, but I am from my namespace. My PHP admin is trying to connect to MySQL service in a default namespace. So I have written .default here. And if I go back on the terminal, so everything is set. We just need to run one more command, which is it is not kubectl, it is minikube. We require this when we don't have external load balancer available and we are working with a minikube. So I will do is service service, and the service name is PHP myadmin-service. Let's copy it. So let's first check kubectl get all. So I have PHP admin service running, and it is waiting for the external IP. And if I say -n, my namespace, there is again a PHP admin deployment. You can see this one is running on port 3001, and this one is running on 3003. So these two PHP admin are running on the different namespaces. One is default and one is my namespace. So what we should do is, I will do minikube service PHP admin service. And what we should do is -n my namespace. So you can see I have PHP admin running on 3001 in default namespace and 3003 on my namespace. So let's go to the browser to see if both are working. So, okay. This is 3003, this is 3001. Both are the same. And how? Let's go to the terminal again. We know that we don't have any database running here. We are just running PHP admin service. And if I do notepad, under our config mag, we have defined the database URL as a MySQL service, but in default namespace, because we know in our default namespace, we have our MySQL service running. So let's kubectl get all in our default namespace. So we have MySQL service running here. So this is the concept. This is the concept of namespaces, and that's how we connect from one namespace to another namespace. And we can see that two PHP admin running in different namespace, and they can connect to the same database. That's it with the namespaces. So I have a small project, and let's first open the. Okay, let's first do it. I want to create a namespace. So we are applying limits that I have a limited resources in my cluster, and what I want to do is I want to put a limit on namespaces so that nobody can exceed them. And as a cluster administrator, it's my responsibility that whatever someone is doing, so they will get enough resources. But if I'm short on resources, so I can apply the limits. So first of all, let's say I have a team. I can create namespace LIMIT limited namespace. I can name it anything. And if I hit kubectl get all -n limited ns, so I have nothing in that namespace. So what I can do is I can define first. Let me open in. Let me share it with you. So we are creating a YAML file. The kind is resource quota. The metadata is, I am calling it memory CPU, because I am limiting this the memory and CPU. And I can say that you can request one CPU because it's a very small minikube cluster, and you can limit CPU to just 2. and memory should be 2. You can request this, and limit is 2. So everybody will have 1 CPU and not more than 1 G RAM. So this is fine. Control S. Let's go to the terminal and apply kubectl apply -s quota. So our quota is applied. Let's create just, I am not creating the complete deployment. I am just creating a pod here. And let me show you the screen again. So I am creating a pod. It's not a deployment. It's just a pod. And the name is memory CPU. Okay. I am naming the pod as just anything, demo or whatever you want. And in the image, I am defining my image that I will pull Nginx. The important thing is under resources, you can apply limits that, okay, memory can be 100 MB and CPU can be 800 megahertz. So these are the limits. You can go there, and the request is just 600 and 400. I am just defining it like that. And let's go and apply this setting. So this is our pod, and we can apply limits on our pod. So I can do kubectl apply -f pod. So pod 1 is created. Now I have a pod 2 YAML file, and here I am creating another pod. And it is saying forbidden error when creating pod 2 because the quota memory CPU 2 is forbidden, exceeded quotas. Mem CPU requested memory is already 600 M. And in my pod number 2, I have again requested further more 600 MB. So this is beyond your quota limits. You cannot do it.